special day for Radnor Middle School. This is an ongoing effort to combat bullying and promote anti-bullying behaviors throughout our building. We're pleased to have Mr. John Halligan with us here today, and tremendous support by the district with Dr. Linda Grobman, who's been kind of taking care of this from the district perspective and making sure that we could operate these programs in our buildings. Dr. Linda Grobman.
Good morning. Radnor Township School District welcomes Representative Brian Lentz, Rick Taylor, and Tim Briggs as they introduce this important anti-bullying bill. Obviously, this is a topic that is important to our school district and indeed to all school districts. Bullying is not new. It's been going on for a long time. But now with the advent of the internet and cyberbullying, these bullying efforts become more permanent and lasting, and we must look at ways to combat it. We in Radnor Township are delighted and honored to host John Halligan today for our students and later this evening for our parents and community. His message is a part of the Radnor Middle School's ongoing educational efforts for our children. I'd like to thank our Radnor Reach, Radnor Encouraging Awareness, Communication, and Hope for our community, for their support in helping us with our community education efforts. Please give them your support in this work. I'd like to introduce my friend, Representative Brian Lentz, who actually on Saturday, clad in a shirt and tie, helped me barbecue some hot dogs at Wayne Elementary School. Representative Lentz.
Well, thank you, and welcome everyone today, and thank you for coming today. We're here in what is really a magnificent school building in a magnificent school district. But no matter how nice the school is and no matter how great the staff is, if children don't want to be here or don't feel safe coming here, they're going to have a hard time learning. And bullying is something that makes it hard for a young person to get out of bed and want to come to school in the morning. And it's a problem that we as adults have to be aware of and have to do everything we can to deal with it. It has long-term effects on the children that are victims of the bullying, and it also is not a positive thing for those that engage in bullying. There's something going on when one child feels the need to bully another, and that needs to be identified, whatever that something is, and that child needs to get help. So it's important that we work together with the educators, work together with parents to stop this practice, to stop bullying, and to stop the tremendously negative and terrible impacts it can have on young people, which you're going to hear more about. But I want to thank Representative Rick Taylor and Representative Briggs for taking leadership on this in the state legislature. We in the state legislature have an obligation to do something about it, and they have stepped up and are doing something on behalf of children, teachers, and educators throughout Pennsylvania. So it's my privilege to have them here today. And with that, I'd like to introduce Representative Rick Taylor, who happens to represent my hometown of Hampton.
Thank you. Well, thank you for coming out today, and I want to thank Dr. Grobman for her great leadership on this issue. I want to thank my colleagues Brian Lentz and Tim Briggs for being out here, and I want to thank Nancy Bear from the Anti-Defamation League coming out, and most importantly, I'd like to thank John Halligan, who is truly a leader in this issue. And too often we've been watching and hearing about the consequences of bullying, and too often those result in very tragic ends. And we need to not look any further than Mr. John Halligan, who is here to honor the memory of his son Ryan. There are also recent cases in South Philadelphia where there was some race-based bullying, and Phoebe Prince in Massachusetts. And unfortunately, I could go on longer. I cannot imagine the pain these children had to endure to drive them to the most drastic measure of ending their lives. And no doubt to them, life simply became too unbearable. Children, especially adolescent children, are at a precarious age. That is when their identities are being molded and when they feel most vulnerable. However, this also happens to be the time when the kids are unfortunately their meanest and feeling the power over another In the end, their behavior can impact the victim more than even the bully can fully comprehend. I'm sure the cruelest memories that you can remember were at about this age. While we cannot totally stamp out anti-bullying, we can do measures to drastically reduce it. And this is what this legislation is about, saying we will not tolerate bullying and it's not okay to treat others poorly. To that end, Representative Briggs and my colleagues have been working on legislation on this important issue that would further expand and strengthen legislation we recently enacted into law. The legislation would do as follows: expand current bullying policy to apply to actions such as harassment, intimidation, bullying, and cyberbullying. Delineate to school administrators what actions they must provide notice and opportunities to report incidents, remedies for victims, and harassment and bullying prevention training. Require schools to provide necessary training and education about bullying for school administrators and teachers so they are prepared for potential situations at the school. Report to the State Board of Education and General Assembly using data to monitor and review policy. Require immediate notification to the parent or guardian of a victim of harassment. And finally, the penalty for non-compliance by a school district they would lose their Safe Schools funding from the state. Currently, there are 42 states that have enacted some sort of anti-bullying legislation. Right now, the recently passed legislation in Massachusetts is the class of these anti-bullying legislations, and this legislation mirrors that. Children deserve the same amount of safety as their parents receive in the workplace, and at the end of the day, I believe every child should feel safe in their environment and be able to turn on the school or attend school and turn on a computer without feeling that they're in a living hell. So as we close the school year with the introduction of this legislation, I would like to open the next school year with the passage of this legislation. I thank you very much, and I'm going to pass it over to my good friend, Representative Briggs.
Thanks a lot, Rick. Rick and I started talking about this legislation last summer. I'm a freshman legislator from Montgomery County and have school-age children, and when I was campaigning, I spoke to a lot of parents and my wife and I about the problems that our kids face in school every day. It just doesn't take a tragedy to put it in the newspapers, but every day kids on the school bus, in the cafeteria, face some kind of bullying behavior. It seems to have been, I was bullied. I probably did a little bit of bullying that I shouldn't talk about, but it seems to have really grown and expedited over the last decade or so. Pennsylvania a few years ago does have a bullying policy in place. This bill that we've talked about is really adding some beef to it, really strengthening it up, and much more oversight and much more analysis is going to be put into the data. So I'm looking forward to advocating for this on the House floor and hopefully getting it passed in the Senate and signed by the governor this year. So I agree with Rick. I think we need to push through the next school year. It's in place. Also want to thank Brian Lentz for having us here. Brian's a great leader on a lot of issues related to crime and a lot of other things. He's just a great guy, and I'm happy to be in his district with him. And I think you're going to put it back to Rick, and he can take the next one.
Now I'd like to introduce John Halligan. He has been a leader in anti-bullying, as Dr. Grobman already talked about. So I'm going to hand it over to him right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First, I want to thank the Radnor Middle School community for inviting me here today to share my son's story and to also talk with the parents this evening. I greatly appreciate the opportunity. I've been in and out of this state quite a few times now in the last couple of years, and I've got to say that every time I've come to Pennsylvania, I've been very impressed with the quality of the community of students and the parents and the administrations in charge of the schools. I know you guys feel like you still have a lot more work to do, but I got to tell you, I've been all over the country and I've seen a lot of states, and Pennsylvania is pretty far ahead. I'm impressed that every time I step into a school, they know what the word Aldeus means. Aldeus is one of these bullying prevention programs that's research-based, very effective, and consistently I hear it brought up when I visit a school in Pennsylvania. So my hat's off to the state. You guys are doing a great job. I think this legislation to further enhance the bullying prevention is a wonderful thing. I've looked at it, and quite frankly, I plan to bring it back to Vermont because I think we have some room for improvement as well. So I wish you luck with the legislative effort here, and again, thank you very much for having me in Pennsylvania. Thank you.
And now I'd like to turn it over to Nancy Baron-Bear from the Anti-Defamation League.
Thank you. ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, is pleased to be here today to support this extremely important legislation that was introduced today by Representatives Briggs, Taylor, and Lentz. Cyberbullying and bullying is a key issue for the Anti-Defamation League. We believe that if a child feels bullied or cyberbullied, they do not feel safe. If a child doesn't feel safe, then they cannot learn. And if a child cannot learn in school, then we as adults are not doing our jobs in society. Parents who work, who feel that they have been harassed, have a mechanism for remedies. We believe that children need to have the same thing. And we believe that this is truly a community issue, one that it involves all of us, parents, teachers, students, law enforcement, psychologists, and the list can go on and on. We sincerely hope that today, Pennsylvania legislators will take this bill and teach our students in Pennsylvania how quickly a bill can become a law.